The morning air tasted like stale coffee and defeat. A grim, gray November morning, the kind that seemed to suck the color out of the world. I was sitting in front of my boss, Craig, watching him with a knot tightening in my gut as he flipped through my promotion request. It wasn't just a binder. It was 5 years of my life. 5 years of extra shifts, of canceled fishing trips with my son, Lucas, 5 years of weekends I missed with my boys, all distilled into a flimsy, 3-ring binder that he was treating like a discarded grocery store flyer. He barely even glanced at the pages, his eyes scanning for keywords, not for the substance of my work. The binder detailed every emergency I'd handled, every fire I'd put out, the time I rebuilt the parts ordering system from the ground up after the last foreman quit without a single note. The 3 months I spent working late and on weekends just to put the pieces back together again. The way I'd tracked down every vendor and created a series of shop manuals that no one else had thought to document, but everyone now depended on. This was my life's work, a testament to my dedication. He looked up, a thin, almost invisible smile on his face, the kind that promised the meeting was already over. "Your work's been fine, Marcus," he said, the words as hollow as a drum, "but you're just not leadership material yet." The phrase hung in the air, a punch to the gut. Not leadership material. My hands tightened into fists under the table. A flash of heat rose in my face, but I kept my composure. I've been here too long, put in too much to fall apart over a couple of words. I nodded. A simple gesture that gave no hint of the fury building inside me. I wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. I've kept our biggest client, Dawson & Cozy's, happy. I fixed systems no one else could, I said, my voice low and steady. I'm the guy who's in first and out last. No one else here does what I do. He didn't even blink. He leaned forward, an air of tired condescension in his posture. "That's great, Marcus. But we're looking for someone who can manage a team, not just a shop floor. We need a vision." The irony was so sharp it could cut glass. "You want me to lead? Then stop throwing me the crap jobs no one else wants. Give me the tools. Give me the respect," I pleaded, my voice rising slightly but still controlled. "And I'll show you leadership." He cut me off before I could finish. "We'll talk about this later. Right now, I need you to handle the supplier issue. Can you do that?" I stood, my jaw clenched so tight I thought it would shatter. This was it. The moment I could push back, demand more. But I knew it was a fight I couldn't win here, not with him. So instead, I nodded. "Sure, I'll handle it." I walked out of his sterile office, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, and past the glass-walled corner office that I'd been eyeing for years. It was empty, of course, the glass reflecting my own tired face, a ghost in a place I didn't belong. Outside, I paused by my truck, the cold air hitting me like a physical blow, and in that moment, I made 2 decisions. First, that I was skipping the one vacation I'd managed to plan this year. It was supposed to be a week with my son, a chance to reconnect. The thought of it now felt like a cruel joke. And second, I was done. Done writing the invisible daily manuals that everyone depended on. Done being the ghost in the machine. No more invisible work for a place that didn't give a damn. I got in my truck, the cab a familiar cocoon of worn leather and the faint smell of engine grease. I sat there for a full minute, the anger still a tight coil in my stomach. 5 years I'd been the operations foreman at Reading Industrial. 5 years of waking up with the alarm at 5 a.m., of getting to the floor before anyone else. When I started, this place was a disaster. The old foreman had just quit, leaving a mess of unfulfilled orders and a shop floor that was a death trap. I was the one who rebuilt it from scratch. Parts orders were a nightmare, vendors were furious, and there was no one else who even knew how to fix the broken systems. I spent the first 3 months living here, putting the pieces back together, creating the manuals for every machine, supplier contact, and workaround that could keep the place running. The kind of stuff no one else would ever think to document, but if they had to, they'd be lost without it. They all depended on those manuals now. The guys on the floor didn't even know I was the one who wrote them. But Craig, he never learned a thing about any of it. He just showed up for meetings, took credit in quarterly reviews, and gave me cost of living raises that didn't even cover the gas it took to drive in early every day. Then came the Dawson & Cozy's contract, the big one that was supposed to change everything. I did the groundwork. I tracked down the specs, worked with the engineers, found the right suppliers, and built out a plan that would keep them happy for the long haul. Craig, he just showed up to shake a few hands and smile for the cameras at the signing ceremony, and that was enough to land him a fat bonus while I kept putting in the hours. It didn't sit right with me, but I kept my head down. What else was I going to do? Keep doing the work and wait for him to notice? That's what I thought for a while. But this latest promotion talk changed everything. The way he dismissed me, as if I wasn't even close to what I'd already built here, as if my contributions didn't matter. It was the last straw. And as I stood in that parking lot, staring at the empty corner office, I made my decision. It wasn't just about the promotion anymore, it was about the whole damn thing. I was done doing invisible work. If they wanted a leader, they weren't getting me at half speed anymore. The next morning, I didn't show up at 7:30 a.m., like usual. I walked in at 9 a.m. sharp, making sure to catch everyone's eye as I clocked in. My phone buzzed in my pocket with a couple of texts from Craig, probably trying to get me to fix something before it blew up. I didn't even open them. I'd stopped caring. By noon, a few more guys wandered over, asking about the same issues. Parts orders late, some machines down. I just kept saying the same thing. That's purchasing's job. It felt good not being the guy who cleaned up everyone else's mess. For once, I wasn't running around doing what no one else wanted to do and getting nothing for it. My phone buzzed again, an urgent tone this time. Another work emergency, but I didn't touch it. I already knew what was waiting for me. I headed home right on time, no extra hours tonight. I spent the night in the garage with my son, Lucas. We were working on his dirt bike, taking it apart and rebuilding it together. My phone buzzed all night, but I didn't touch it. I was done playing the role of the guy who sacrificed everything for a place that wouldn't even notice if I disappeared. Tonight, I was just a dad fixing bikes and enjoying the silence. By the second day, the shop floor was a disaster. It was a tangible, visceral kind of chaos that a man like Craig, who dealt only in spreadsheets and empty pleasantries, couldn't possibly comprehend. Machines were down, parts were late, and the Dawson & Cozy's project, our biggest contract and the cornerstone of the company's Q4, was in freefall. I got a message from Craig, the frantic tone a stark contrast to his usual calm arrogance. "Need you to handle Dawson urgently." I didn't respond. I didn't even bother to open the message. Instead, I calmly sipped my coffee and logged into the shared drive. There they were, the manuals I'd spent countless hours creating, 200 pages of everything he and everyone else should have known, meticulously organized and hyperlinked. But I knew no one had read them. They had relied on me to be their human cheat sheet, a living, breathing database. When Craig finally stormed over to my station, his face was red, his jaw tight, a thin vein pulsing in his temple. He looked less like a manager and more like a little boy who'd just lost his favorite toy. "Marcus, we've got a problem with Dawson. I need you to fix this now." I looked at him for a second, letting the silence stretch, a small act of defiance in a place where I had always been the first to jump. I stayed seated. "The manuals are on the shared drive. Should be all the info you need," I said, my voice calm but firm. His face twitched. "I don't have time for that. You're the one who knows how to fix it. Come on, Marcus, just help me out here." The desperation in his voice was a sweet, sharp victory. "I've got an OSHA compliance review that's more important than Dawson right now," I said, a lie so simple and so effective it almost made me smile. "You can figure it out. I'm not the one who dropped the ball." I left him standing there, a man completely out of his depth. At 5 p.m., I walked out of the shop again, just as I had the day before. The phone started buzzing before I even hit the parking lot. 8 missed calls. By the time I got home, there were 86, most of them from Craig. The Dawson & Cozy's manager was threatening to walk. Deadlines were shot, machines were down, and the entire shop was in chaos. I left the phone in my truck and went inside. The kids were telling me about their day, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel that pressure to fix everything. I slept like a baby. The next day, my phone rang again, but this time it was an unknown number. I almost didn't answer it. It was a headhunter. "Mr. Marcus," he said, his voice slick and professional. "I have a compelling offer for you from a competitor. Word on the street is you're a man who gets things done, and that you might be looking for a change." The call was a pivotal moment, a validation of everything I'd done. It gave me a real, tangible alternative, a way out that didn't involve begging for scraps from Craig. The offer was a direct result of my silent protest. The industry grapevine was buzzing with the sudden, inexplicable operational failure at Reading Industrial, and they knew the common denominator was my absence. It solidified my resolve. My gambit was working. By the third day, I was sitting in the conference room with Craig and Martin, the company VP. The tension in the air was so thick you could almost slice it. Craig had that familiar look of a man on the edge, his jaw tight, his hands balled into fists on the table, as if he was waiting for the slightest mistake so he could jump in and save the day. And he was a man who thrived on drama and the credit that came with solving it, but he was completely out of his element now. Martin, on the other hand, was different. He got straight to it, no beating around the bush. "We need you to fix this Dawson & Cozy's mess, Marcus," he said, his voice measured but firm. He wasn't pleading like Craig. He was assessing. He was looking at a problem and the man who could solve it. Craig, however, couldn't contain himself. He cut in, his voice a frantic knife. "The promotion's yours, just get it done." I let the words hang in the air for a second, a small, satisfying silence. Then I leaned back in my chair, the worn leather creaking softly under my weight. "I'm not interested in a promotion anymore, Craig." Both of them froze. Craig's face went from a furious red to a pasty white, as if I'd just slapped him, but I wasn't done. A competitor already offered me a senior role with more pay, better benefits, and full control over my team. Martin's eyes narrowed, his lips a thin, calculating line. He was a man who understood numbers and leverage. He was calculating the cost of losing me versus the cost of keeping me. "I can match the offer," he said quickly, his voice almost a whisper. "Almost too quickly. We value you here. Don't make a rash decision." I kept my voice steady, my gaze fixed on his. "It's not just about the money, Martin. It's about respect. It's about authority. I've been holding this place together for 5 years. I deserve to run things the right way without having to keep cleaning up everyone else's mess." I leaned forward, meeting both of their eyes, the two men who had held my fate in their hands. The power had shifted. It was mine now. "I'll stay, but only if I have full control over my team, and I want Craig to stay in his current role." Martin's eyes widened. Surprised at my audacity, he looked from me to Craig, whose face was a mixture of shock and betrayal. I didn't care. This wasn't about him anymore. This was about me, and about every other person in this company who had been buried under the weight of invisible work. I stood up, the chair scraping against the floor, and placed my 2-week notice on the table. As soon as the door shut behind me, I heard Martin call Craig's name, his voice urgent. But I didn't stop. I didn't even look back. The game was over. I had made my move, and now it was up to them to respond. I had laid out my conditions, and my future was no longer in their hands. Monday morning, I got the call from Martin's office. His voice was different. Less like an angry supervisor and more like a calculating chess master who had just made his move. "I've got a proposal for you, Marcus," he said, leaning back in his chair as I entered. "We need you in a bigger role, one where you can lead without these distractions." He was using my own language against me. It was a subtle sign of respect. "I want you as director of operations." The title alone was a monumental leap. Double your pay, 3 days a week remote, and you'll report directly to me. What do you say? On paper, it was a fantastic offer. More money, more freedom, and a direct line to the top. But it wasn't just about the title or the pay, it was about the principle. I had stuck around for so long because I believed in this place. I just didn't believe in the way it was being run. I'll think about it over the weekend, I said, keeping my voice even. But I'm still dealing with Dawson. Let's get them stabilized first. Martin nodded, clearly relieved. I respect that. Let's handle the immediate issues, and then we can talk. I left his office, the weight of the decision hanging over me. I immediately dove into the Dawson and Cozy's mess. I pulled up their account, my mind already forming a plan. I wasn't going to just swoop in and save the day. I was going to show them I was worth it by doing it the right way. I spent the rest of the day delegating, letting my team handle what they could while I focused on setting the direction. No more being the guy who fixes every little screw-up. As the day was ending, I was walking past Jessica, a young, sharp analyst who was always quietly observing everything. She gave me a knowing, almost challenging look. "Heard you're the new king of the castle," she said with a smirk, a hint of steel in her voice. I just nodded, a non-committal answer. I knew she was a friend of Craig's and a potential rival, but I also saw her as a potential resource, a new variable to factor into the equation. As I was leaving the office, my phone buzzed with a message that froze me in my tracks. It wasn't from Craig, it was from my ex-wife. "Marcus, call me. Lucas was in an accident." A sickening wave of panic washed over me. The world went silent, and my focus on work, on my gambit, on my revenge, instantly evaporated. The past few days, I'd been so wrapped up in my grand plan that I'd completely lost sight of the most important thing in my life. The very thing I was supposed to be doing all this for. All my calculated moves, my power plays, my carefully orchestrated revenge suddenly felt small and pathetic. My son, my little boy, my world. The hospital waiting room was a sterile, unforgiving space, its fluorescent lights buzzing a relentless rhythm that only amplified my guilt. Lucas's accident had been minor, a broken wrist and some scrapes after a bad landing on his dirt bike. But the sight of him lying on that bed, his small face pale and scared, hit me harder than any professional setback ever could. My ex-wife, Sarah, was there, her expression a mix of relief and barely contained fury. "He's fine," she said, her voice low and tight. "But you weren't here, Marcus. Again, you were too busy with whatever it is you do." The sting in her words was a truth I couldn't deny. While I was orchestrating my grand professional revenge, my son was just a text message away from needing me, and I hadn't even bothered to open the message. As I sat there, the frantic calls from Craig and Martin on my phone felt like a distant, meaningless echo. The shop, the manuals, the promotion, it all seemed so trivial now. My master plan, which had felt so cunning and righteous just a few hours ago, was now revealed for what it was, a self-serving distraction that had cost me precious time with my son. In that moment, I realized my entire gambit had been flawed from the start. I was fighting to prove my worth to a company that had consistently undervalued me, but I had lost sight of the people who truly mattered, the people I was fighting for. The guilt was a heavy, suffocating blanket. I was so focused on being the hero who saved the company that I had forgotten how to be the hero who showed up for his family. Right there, in that sterile waiting room, I made a new decision, a non-negotiable one. My family would come first, no matter the professional cost. I would not allow myself to be a prisoner of the shop again. I stepped out into the hallway and called Martin. The moment he answered, I could hear the relief in his voice. "Marcus, thank God, we need you to come in. The situation is dire." "Listen, Martin," I said, my voice shaking slightly but filled with a new resolve. "I'm at the hospital. My son was in an accident. I won't be in until he's home, and I know he's okay. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I braced myself for the anger, the frustration, the dismissal. But it never came. Instead, Martin's voice softened. "I understand. Take all the time you need. Your family comes first. Just keep me in the loop." He hung up, leaving me standing in the quiet hallway. I looked down at my phone and saw a text from Sarah. "Thank you for coming." It wasn't an apology, but it was a step. The first step towards rebuilding. The weight of the world was still on my shoulders, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like the right kind of weight. It was the weight of a father, not just a foreman. A few weeks later, I was back at work, but it was different this time. The weight was still there, but it felt purposeful. Lucas was home, recovering, and the conversations with my ex-wife, Sarah, had been difficult but necessary. My new, non-negotiable condition that my family would come first had changed everything. My first act as director of operations was a complete paradigm shift. I wasn't just fixing problems, I was building something new. I started by looking at the people who had been overlooked, the ones who were the true backbone of this company, just as I had been. I found Danny, a quiet, unassuming machine tech with a mind for troubleshooting that was sharper than anyone else's, but no one had ever given him a chance to step up. And then there was Michelle, the parts clerk who had the entire supply chain mapped out in her head, but was always stuck filling out forms and tracking orders. I brought them both into my office and laid it all out. "You're both getting a new project," I told them. "You're going to work together to streamline our entire production line." I gave them a budget and a deadline, and then stepped back. They ran with it. Danny's ability to troubleshoot on the fly and Michelle's encyclopedic knowledge of the supply chain were a powerful combination. They were a team, and I was their leader. But for the first time in my career, I wasn't doing the work for them. I was empowering them to do it themselves. Within the first month, our overtime dropped by 40%. It was unheard of. Productivity jumped, and we started hitting our deadlines consistently. Even Dawson and Cozy's noticed. They doubled their order. The whole floor was running smoother, and people were starting to respect the new direction because they saw that I was focused on making their lives better, not just on making the company more money. I noticed Craig watching me from a distance, his expression a mixture of bewilderment and something I couldn't quite decipher. We didn't talk much. We weren't friends, but we weren't enemies either. There was a quiet respect between us now, even if he didn't quite understand the way I was doing things. He was a man who saw power in control, in keeping people small. I was showing him that true power lay in empowerment. One afternoon, Jessica, the sharp-witted analyst I'd seen before, knocked on my office door. She looked nervous but determined. "Can I talk to you for a second, Marcus?" she asked. I gestured to the chair across from me. "Of course, Jessica. What's on your mind?" She sat down, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I've seen what you've done here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have to admit something. I was working with Craig to undermine you. I was keeping him updated on what you were doing, trying to find a way to get ahead myself. I didn't say anything, just let the silence hang in the air." Her eyes met mine, full of a genuine regret I hadn't expected. "But now, I see what you're building. You're not just taking over, you're making this a better place for everyone. I don't want to work for Craig anymore. I want to be part of your team. I want to learn to lead from you." The admission was a new layer of complexity, an unexpected but welcome twist. It was a sign that I was not just winning the game, I was changing the rules. 6 months passed. The changes were undeniable. Overtime was a distant memory, and our productivity numbers were the highest in company history. The Dawson and Cozy's contract was not just back on track, it had become our flagship account. I had built a team, not just a group of employees. Danny and Michelle were thriving, and even Jessica, the former rival, was proving to be one of my most effective lieutenants. My professional life was in a state of controlled harmony. I had proven that a different, more humane approach to leadership worked. Then came the call I didn't see coming. It was Martin. "Marcus," he said, his voice unusually somber, "the board has voted. They're bumping you up to VP." My heart swelled with a mixture of pride and satisfaction. This was it, the final validation. Martin continued. The board was impressed by the numbers, and surprisingly, Craig gave the loudest endorsement. The surprise was so profound it left me speechless. Craig? The man who had denied me a promotion? The one I had professionally outmaneuvered? Why would he support me? It was a mystery I didn't have time to solve because, just as I was about to thank Martin, I received another call. This one from Sarah. "Lucas is getting better, Marcus," she said, her voice softer than it had been in years. "He's getting a new cast tomorrow. Do you want to come with us?" My focus shifted instantly from the boardroom to the hospital. "I'll be there," I said, a wave of relief washing over me. The promotion felt hollow compared to that simple, powerful moment. I realized that the greatest victory wasn't the title or the office. It was the fact that I had made a choice to be present, to put my family first, and the company was finally recognizing that as a strength, not a weakness. The day the official announcement went out, I could feel the shift. Everyone who had barely nodded at me before was shaking my hand, offering congratulations, acting like I was the new king of the castle. I couldn't help but notice Craig's reaction when he walked by my office. He dropped a folder on my desk without a word, then paused, his eyes meeting mine for a fraction of a second. And he cleared his throat. "The exact meeting is tomorrow. Got a few things for you to look over." I glanced at the folder, then back at him. "I've got it, Craig. I'll review it." He stood there, his posture stiff, and a glimmer of something I hadn't seen before in his eyes. A kind of fragile respect mixed with something else. It was almost like a confession. "Look, I didn't want to keep you down. I thought you'd be more comfortable where you were." I didn't react. Didn't even flinch. "That's exactly the problem, Craig," I said, my voice calm. He shifted on his feet, his gaze dropping to the floor. "I couldn't afford to lose you, Marcus. I really couldn't." I let that hang in the air, a final, unsaid acknowledgement of the power shift. There was nothing more to say. If he hadn't seen it before, it wasn't my job to make him see it now. He was finally seeing me not just as an employee, but as a leader. The kind of promotion that truly mattered was not a title, but a change in the way others saw you, and more importantly, how you saw yourself. The first few weeks in the new role were a reset. I was picking up the pieces of a shop floor that was still running on fumes, trying to squeeze more out of what had been stretched too thin. But something was different now. I wasn't the guy running around fixing every little fire. I had a team, and I was delegating, not doing it all myself. I started by looking at the people who'd been overlooked for years, the ones who were the true backbone of this company. There was Danny, the machine tech who had a mind for troubleshooting like no one else, but nobody had ever given him a chance to step up, and Michelle, the parts clerk, who had the supply chain mapped out in her head, but was always stuck filling out forms and tracking orders. I put them together on a project, gave them real responsibility, and suddenly they were running circles around everyone else. I cut overtime by 40% in the first month. It was unheard of. Productivity went up, and we started hitting our deadlines consistently. Even Dawson and Cozy's noticed. They doubled their order. The whole floor was running smoother, and people were starting to respect the new direction. I had proven that a different, more humane approach to leadership worked. Craig and I didn't talk much. We weren't friends, but we weren't enemies either. There was a quiet, unspoken respect between us now, even if he didn't quite understand the way I was doing things. He was a man who saw power in control, in keeping people small. I was showing him that true power lay in empowerment. 6 months in, I got the call I didn't see coming. The board had voted, and they were bumping me up to VP. Craig actually gave the loudest endorsement. It was a surprise, but in a way it was a relief. It wasn't the title or the office that made me feel like I'd won. It was the fact that things were changing. The work was being seen now, no more invisible work. That night, I headed home on time for the first time in years. I had a promise to keep. I helped my son with his science project, the one that had been collecting dust on the kitchen table. As we worked through the details of his assignment, I thought back to when I'd always been the guy showing up early, covering for everyone, going unnoticed. That wasn't me anymore. I was making sure no other guy in this shop got buried doing the work that went unappreciated. And the best part? My son was watching me lead instead of just work. That's the kind of promotion that actually matters. The final 6 months in my new role were a whirlwind of purposeful work. I wasn't just fixing a company anymore, I was building a culture. The in-house training program I dreamt of, the one built by someone who had been where they were, was a massive success. We weren't just hiring talent, we were cultivating it from within. No more handing off a job and hoping it got done right. We were focusing on the guys who'd been buried in the background, the ones who had never gotten the recognition but kept the whole place running. Danny, the machine tech, was the first to step up. He'd been here forever, but never had the chance to lead. Now I was putting him in charge of troubleshooting for the entire production line. I'd seen the way he worked, how he broke down problems no one else could touch. He had the instincts. I was just giving him the space to prove it. Michelle, the parts clerk, was next. She knew the supply chain better than anyone in the building. Now she was building out processes that streamlined everything, cutting out the dead weight that used to slow us down. I made sure she knew her value, that she wasn't just the woman behind the counter, but a strategic partner who made the whole system work. The results spoke for themselves. Overtime dropped another 15%. Productivity jumped. Dawson and Cozy's not only doubled their order, but their CEO personally called me to thank us for turning things around. It was the kind of acknowledgement I'd been waiting for, even if it wasn't why I was doing it anymore. The praise was for the team, for the people who had been given a chance to shine. One afternoon, Martin stopped by my office. His usual cool demeanor was replaced by a genuine look of approval. "The board's never been happier with the results, Marcus. You've turned this place around." I just nodded. I didn't need the praise, but I took it anyway. It wasn't for me, though. It was for the team I'd built, for the guys who had no chance before but were now getting the recognition they deserved. Driving home that night, I thought about the old me, the guy who showed up early, covered for everyone, and went unnoticed. That guy was gone now. I had chosen to lead, and I was no longer cleaning up other people's messes. And the best part? My son was watching me lead instead of just working. He was seeing what it looked like to have a real impact, not just on a company, but on the people within it. That's the kind of promotion that actually matters.